Hey, this is Mad Hatter here, and I got a bunch of positive feedback on how does mob spawning work video, and I thought I would try the same format again. If you like this video, let me know by liking the video. I'm going to have to cut out a bunch of detail in this video to make it a reasonable length. If you want to know more about a specific component or technique, let me know in the comments. Again, I'm not perfect in my knowledge, nobody is, so if I'm wrong on a topic, let me know in the comments. Let's get started. I know that this is the part of the video where most people's eyes glaze over, but I have to cover it, so bear with me. Ticks are a unit of time in Minecraft. Think of these as short seconds. We have two types of ticks in Minecraft, redstone ticks and game ticks. For this video, we're really going to focus on redstone ticks. When the game is running smoothly without lag, we get 10 redstone ticks per second. During a redstone tick, all of the redstone operations happen. In Bedrock, these things happen in a hash table rather than in array order. Those words probably mean nothing to you, so let's talk about what they mean. In Java Edition, all operations execute in grid order. Think about it as setting up dice on a table and rolling each dice one by one and tallying up the results. You can imagine this method is not a very efficient way of rolling the dice. In Bedrock, the approach is more similar to scooping up all the dice, rolling them at the exact same time, and recording the results as they land. You can imagine that allowing all the dice rolls to occur at the exact same time is much more efficient, but you'll write down the results in a random order. In my opinion, that's the biggest complaint that people have when moving from Java to Bedrock. It's different, and you will be frustrated if you're taking Java Redstone and bringing it into Bedrock. The games are not the same, and yes, some things work better in Java, but some things work far better in Bedrock as well. So next we should talk about simulation distance. Simulation is the area of the world where redstone entity data is processed. The rest of the world is suspended. It's just sitting there. The world is divided into chunks, and the chunks are groups of blocks that are simulated or suspended together. This is why people say you should chunk align your redstone. If you don't, half of the machine could be running, and the other half of the machine could be suspended, potentially breaking the machine. The technical resource pack that Bud and I made contains a way to measure the ticking area from the AFK spot. Simply put a stick in the armor stand's hand and you'll see the ticking area for various simulation settings. Currently, the most common simulation setting is 4 chunks from the player. And now that we have the boring stuff out of the way, let's start talking components. Redstone dust is the wires that we use for putting together contraptions. In Bedrock, the dust is a bit more what you see is what you get. It snaps to components, it updates, it shows you how it's connected through glass, and it shows you how the signal is routed. There are a few bugs. The representation is not 100% accurate. Notably, redstone lines redirect in the back of pistons technically also point in the forward direction, and that's tripped me up in the past. However, for the most part, what you see is what you get. If you see redstone connected, it works that way. This is not true in Java Edition, as redstone doesn't travel up and down blocks as expected and can be very frustrating to work with. Earlier when we were talking about redstone devices being randomly calculated, there is some predictability here. In the timing, redstone dust gets calculated before the devices that are powered. So in the redstone tick, it calculates new dust being powered, then the devices receiving powers, and then what the devices do. One thing to note is that redstone dust drops by signal strength of 1 level per block traveled. This means that eventually you do need to boost the signal and make it travel further if you are going to make really big circuits. The redstone repeater is a device that accepts redstone power, amplifies it to the maximum level of 16, then delays and potentially extends the signal, and the component can be configured to delay by 1/10 of a second all the way up to 4/10 of a second. It's important to note that if you send a signal to a repeater that is 1/10 of a second long, and you have the repeater on 4/10 of a second, the pulse width will be extended. This can be a big factor when you're working on signals that use pulses in a specific pulse length. The repeater also has an often overlooked latch feature. If you use repeaters to power the side of a repeater, it prevents the repeater from updating. This is one way that people store data in Redstone circuits. You can lock the repeater and save what is happening at that precise point in time on that repeater using this method. Redstone torches are one of the oldest Redstone components. They provide us with the ability to power Redstone as well as boost signal and make logic operations happen. Basically, the torch is on when the block it is attached to is off, and vice versa. This is the first component that we have covered that allows us to conditionally manipulate things. Using dust and repeaters and torches, we can start to make clocks. Using the torches, we can shorten pulses down to 1 tick. Using torches, we can make circuits that require 2 or more inputs to be powered on for one device. With the torch, things begin to be interesting. The torch does add 1 tick of delay or 1/10 of a second to anything it is powering it. I have tons of circuits I could talk about here, but I'm going to cut it off so that we can cover some other devices. If you want some basic circuits, let me know in the comments. I can walk through those in the future if you want. The next Redstone component I think we should talk about is the comparator. This component allows us to measure things. Before the comparator, all we could do was digital tasks. We could only have on or off, and now we can access various levels of on and off. So what do I mean by that? Basically, the comparator can be used to detect how full a container is, for instance. Each container is slightly different in how it measures fullness. So I'm going to leave that as part of your homework, but you can make a really simple measurement circuit by placing redstone dust on top of blocks next to redstone lamps. I do recommend playing with containers for yourself and seeing how far the signal goes with each type of container, but that's not all that comparators can do. They can also be used to copy the exact signal strength with 1 tick of delay. With that, we can make much longer pulse extenders. These are called decay circuits. And again, if you want more about these comparator circuits, let me know in the comments. But we have some more functions to cover, so we're going to move on. The other 2 functions the comparator has is to compare signals and subtract signals. We'll start with compare. Basically, if you feed a signal into the side of a comparator, the comparator will output a signal if the input is greater than the signal strength at the side. Internally, it compares these 2 values and changes its behavior based upon what signal is higher. This is very powerful and, in my opinion, an underused feature of the Redstone device. In the final function we are going to cover today is the subtract function. We get this function by right-clicking on the comparator and having it turn the front torch on. This function works similar to the compare function, but it simply reduces the signal strength of the input signal by the amount on the side of the comparator. I use this all the time. When I want to only let a Minecraft travel if it has at least a certain number of items in it, or if we want to release things at specific signal strength levels. Again, this is a very powerful tool. Hoppers are a way for us to move, collect, and transport items. In conjunction with comparators, they make one of my favorite things in the game, the ability to automatically sort items. Hoppers are able to point in 5 different directions: north, south, east, west, and down. And they can push, pull, or hold items. If a hopper is powered, it holds the items and does not push or pull them. It seems that the hopper does have a predictable order in its own processes, it'll first push an item and then pull an item, and if it's powered on, it'll hold. This is part of the metering function that the hopper does to transfer only a fixed number of items per second. The hopper can only process 2.5 items per second. In Bedrock, the order that each hopper is processed is random, so we need to think about hoppers acting in isolation rather than as in a chain. Sometimes the one hopper will be processed before the hopper next to it, and sometimes it'll be processed after the hopper next to it. If you're willing to slow down the hopper chain, you can control the way things are to make them very predictable. If you speed up the redstone in the filter, they also become less random. The hopper, on average, has 4 ticks between pushes. So we need to make sure that we lock the hopper to extend that, or we need to make sure that everything happens in 2 ticks. This is to ensure that if the hopper before is processed first, and the hopper after is processed first, that we get the expected results. So to walk through this, the comparator will take 1 tick, and if the hopper before has not yet pushed, it will not be detected, and then the next tick it would be detected, and then we would want to invert the signal to pull items out, and then while that signal is being inverted, the other hopper could have already pushed if we make this a standard Java style sorter. That's why we get much better reliability in the sorters like mine or the one that Silent Whisperer did. Pistons are one of the other old components in Minecraft. They allow us to move blocks around the world. Pistons work very differently on Bedrock than in Java. Pistons on Bedrock can either push and pull, or only push. For a very long time, the Bedrock community has been asking for pistons that push and release. This would make flying machines so much easier. However, at the moment, what we have to work with is what we got. So, and before somebody else says this has anything to do with Quasi connectivity, it doesn't. It has to do with how Java processes redstone ticks versus game ticks, and QC is a completely different bug, and QC is not required to make block splitting work. I will rant about QC at the end of the video, stick around for that, but for now, let's get back to Bedrock Pistons. Pistons can move almost any block in the game. They can push up to 12 blocks, and the only blocks that the piston can't move or break at the time of recording is blocks that are made of obsidian. I know there are blocks coming that the piston cannot break or move, but those are in betas and snapshots, and I don't want to speculate about things that are not released yet. The piston can be paired with slime or honey to make a more complex machine. If you want more information on Slimestone, I can do my best in a future video. For now, I'll leave it at that for the sake of time. Moving on, in Bedrock, pistons can redirect redstone and they can manipulate blocks. Manipulating blocks is intended function here. However, redirecting redstone is actually quite interesting, because in Bedrock, the piston can pick up power from redstone blocks, redstone dust, or other power sources, and it can have a redstone torch attached to it. It can do something that is really rare. It can soft invert a redstone torch. This is very useful in redstone projects that are very compact and in tileable contraptions. Anytime the piston is powered, the redstone torch is not powered. If you didn't know, the observer is one of my favorite redstone components. The observer looks for changes in the world, and it puts out short pulses when a change occurs. In Bedrock, this will generally be pending tick data or block data. Pending tick is a long story. However, it is a mechanism that Minecraft Bedrock uses to delay the processing of data from one tick to another tick. This is how water updates, scaffolding breaks, and many other things function. There is some weirdness that occurs due to the pending tick, but generally it is the system that Bedrock uses to pass data from one tick to the next. Now that we talked about pending tick, there are some limitations to what Minecraft will process. Generally, Minecraft will only process 100 pending tick events per game tick. That's why when you move a bunch of water, it flows more slowly than if you put down a single bucket. This prevents some of the hard freezes and crashes that occur in Java. When a huge number of block updates occur in the same tick, it sometimes causes crashes on Java Edition, but because of the limit of 100 events, it does not crash in Bedrock. That also means that we can really only get 100 observers to fire per redstone tick per chunk. After that, the game starts to not process them, and all the redstone gets a little bit buggy. Note, I said 100 observers per tick. That doesn't mean you need to keep less than 100 observers in a chunk. It just means that they need to not all fire at the exact same tick. If I go into what the observer can and cannot detect, we'll be here for quite a while, so I think we'll talk about how to use the signal from the observer. In Bedrock, you can attach a torch to the backside of the observer. This is super nice for one-wide tileable devices. Being able to invert the observation to, say, unlock a hopper only when movement occurs, it massively simplifies machines. In addition, you can use observers and clocks or other pulses and detect the edges, both the rising and falling edge. Being able to watch the world is a super powerful tool in the Redstone tool chest, but it's a lot to cover in a short video, so we'll leave it there. Target blocks are a newer component. They're able to redirect redstone and produce redstone power. They're really handy if you want to redirect and invert a signal. For instance, if you have a line of dust on one side and you want to invert the opposite side, you put a line of target blocks with torches on them, and generally this will act the same way that the piston will, but it's a little bit smaller. Note, it can only work with redstone dust. The piston can also work with redstone blocks. Pressure plates, buttons are types of simple player input or entity detection. A couple of brief points here. Wood buttons hold a signal a little bit longer than stone buttons. If you're going to use an iron door, I recommend using a wood button to make it easier to exit. Pressure plates come in 3 versions: heavy weighted, light weighted, and normal. The heavy weighted gives you an analog measurement of the number of entities on the plate. It counts in units of 10. The lightweight pressure plate counts in units of 1. So I left a lot out, but this is getting to be a little bit of a longer video, and I could do a part 2 on this if you're interested in. But for now, I didn't cover lamps, daylight detectors, rails, trap chests, tripwire hooks, string, slime, honey, lecterns, redstone lamps, or really any of the circuits themselves. This has been more of a mechanics related video. If you want information on those, let me know in the comments. So now I'm gonna rant. So if you want to skip to the end of the video, that's fine, but this is my QC rant. So first off, QC makes many redstone contraptions bigger, just as many as it makes smaller. It's not strictly making things smaller, and people are confused by that. It has some uses in block update detection. Before the observer existed, it was the only way to do block update detection in the world. Observers were specifically added to Bedrock before Java to allow for block update detection in a supported manner. A QC is purely a way of making an observer before the observer exists, using bugs in the code. Yes, QC does allow for turning corners in specific ways that are not possible with observers, but generally it causes a lot of issues with redstone locking up or contraptions interacting in unintuitive and unexpected ways. It isn't that this can't be worked around. It is that it creates a barrier to entry to Redstone for new players, and it creates a toxic culture. In fact, that's my biggest complaint with QC. If you enter a Redstone community on Java and you say, I don't like QC, you'll be called names, you'll be made fun of because you would like QC if you were smarter and understood it better. The toxicity that QC has added to the Java community actually has turned me off to the entire version of Minecraft. In addition, the toxicity around my contraption is going to be broke if Mojang fix a bug, so go yell at them for me, is damaging to the game in general. I do respect that people invest a lot of time in designing their farms or their machines, but bugs should die. When a farm or machine dies, it's an opportunity for a new innovation, and the Java community that pushes to keep QC is focused on status quo rather than innovation, and that frustrates me. Pushing your fans onto developers and encouraging them to be nasty to other people who are fixing problems with the game is just wrong. The response the technical community has shown to that bug is simply not okay, and it shouldn't be encouraged. When people lobby for bugs to be added to Bedrock Edition or lobby for bugs to be kept, they're stifling innovation. They're putting the developers in a bad spot, and we should be pushing for better quality mechanics that make the game easier to play and more approachable. Not what makes one YouTuber's farm work best, and that's why I hate QC. Ultimately, it exists because of a toxic subculture in Minecraft. Not because it's good, and not because it's the right thing for the game. Anyway, that's enough with ranting. If you learned something from this video, please leave a like. If you want more, let me know. Subscribe if you want, just in case I do make something that you do like in the future. Anyway, this is Mad Hatter, and I'm out. Bye!